Hey everybody, welcome or welcome back to Bourbon Over Headlines. Pour yourself a glass, sit back, and let's enjoy ourselves. Today we're going to St. Louis, the Gateway City. So let's take a sip and let's begin. Once again, I'm having the Eagle Rare. I made it old fashioned this time, but it's the Eagle Rare 10 year. I got from the Sazerac house when I went to New Orleans a couple weeks ago. I have a New Orleans episode. I'll put it up in this corner, or one of these corners. A New Orleans episode after this one, so be looking ready for that one. So we're going to St. Louis. So I think everyone in the United States has probably heard of St. Louis. If you haven't and you're outside, I got some people listening from overseas. St. Louis is called the Gateway City because it's pretty much where everyone started to go out west. So I heard of the Oregon Trail, anything that was westward expansion. St. Louis was that city where you started. It was the biggest city for a while. That was the gate. That's why it was called the Gateway City, because it was where you started to take your trek out west to get to California, get to all that. So a little bit about the founding. St. Louis was received by a trading business between Gilbert Antoine de Saint-Maxent and Pierre Lyquest. So you remember, this is part of Louisiana territory up until we bought in 1803, because it's right on the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. Which, quick fact, the Missouri River is the longest river in the United States, not the Mississippi. Everybody thinks it's the Mississippi, but the Missouri is the longest. What makes the Mississippi unique and makes it such a vital part is there are no waterfalls the whole length of the Mississippi, which makes it super good and super great for shipping, because you don't have to stop, take the cargo around the waterfall. You can just go straight down the river, whereas a lot of rivers have waterfalls, so it makes it harder to have the full length of the river for shipping purposes. Usually you have to have it up to a certain point, take it off, go to the nearest post where it's around the waterfall, and go from there. Whereas the Mississippi, there's no waterfalls. That makes it super unique. Now, Saint-Maxent invested in the Mississippi River trading post, and an expedition to search for a location for their fur trading company. So we're looking for a post for the fur trading company. They picked a site called Genevieve, even though he saw a site. He found a site called St. Genevieve, but he was also looking for a site that was less prone to flooding, which he ended up with a little higher area near the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi, and he called it St. Louis. The confluence of the Missouri and the Illinois, but it's right there at the Mississippi too. In addition to having a great natural drainage system, there are nearby forest areas to supply timber and grassland, so you can easily convert for agricultural purposes and build your early wood buildings. He dispatched his 14-year-old stepson to the site with the support of 30 settlers. So he settled the site in 1764, and it's technically an independent city. So St. Louis is what they call an independent city, which means it is independent from the county. It's in St. Louis County, but it's independent from the county. So it's its own city. It voted to be outside the county. It's independent city. So that's just an interesting note. It's an independent city, so it just is what it is. So the population in 1920 was just over 777,000. 1930s, 821,000, and it's around 1 million today. Just over 1 million today. So it's steadily going up. A couple things about the history of St. Louis. If anyone here is, how should I put this? One of the most famous Supreme Court decisions, arguably the worst Supreme Court decision in history, started in St. Louis. If you go to St. Louis, I've been to St. Louis. It's a great town, by the way. I've been there twice for a baseball game, but the other time I was there for more than just a baseball game. The old courthouse, the old federal courthouse is there. And there's a picture, if you get from the fountains through the arch You can see right into the federal courthouse. It's a great picture. This is where the Dred Scott decision came from. Now, a little bit about the Dred Scott decision. I'm sure we've all heard about it in American history if you're an American. Basically, it started in 1846, Dred Scott versus Sanford. Now, the Supreme Court ruled on in 1857, but the trial started in 1846, the federal trial. Basically, Dred Scott was suing to become a citizen. He was a free slave. He was suing to become a citizen. So, this ruling, which has been overturned, basically the Civil War amendments, all that overturned this ruling. It said that enslaved people were not citizens. So he was a slave. Enslaved people were not citizens, could not sue in federal court, and that Congress had no constitutional to ban slavery in federal territories, deeply influencing and accelerating the American path to the American. Now, the path to the American Civil War. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, we've gone over this briefly in a different episode. I have to find which one I don't remember. Stephen Douglas of the Stephen Douglas debates, or the Lincoln Douglas debates, one of his main things was something called popular sovereignty. Okay? Now, this was 1857. He started saying that in 1858. I think this is one of the reasons why he had backing on that, where he was like, let the territories decide themselves and vote among themselves whether they wanted it, whether they wanted slavery, or they didn't. Now, the federal government couldn't constitutionally ban slavery, so it couldn't say you can't have slavery. But Stephen Douglas and a lot of his followers said, if you want to vote, let them vote it in, not let us decide this one. Let's not pick and choose as the federal government. Let's let them decide. And this is the reason why that sort of gained momentum. As a side note, okay, so a little quote, small history lesson. 1820 was the Missouri Compromise. So in 1820 they made a compromise that every state, they would admit, pretty much they had to admit 2 states at a time. One state was a slave state, one state was a non-slave state, to keep the balance between the slave states and the non-slave states, because it didn't really matter so much in the House of Representatives as it did in the U.S. Senate. Because in the U.S. Senate, there's 2 senators per state. And back then, not now, back then, state legislatures, okay, picked the senators. So if it was a slave state, there's a pretty good guarantee that the senators would be full of slavery, and vice versa, okay? So they wanted to keep that balance. That way, there wasn't in the Senate a block. It wasn't like 60 to 40 or whatever. It wasn't 60-40 back then. It was probably, let's say, 48. Probably, I think there was 90 senators, so it would have to be 45-45 for a tie. So let's say it was 48-40-41. It wasn't 48-41. There wasn't an imbalance there, okay, of one side, whether it's a non-slave side or the slavery pro-slavery side, could just all vote together and push things through, because that's what they're afraid would happen. And so that's why they tried to keep the balance. Then you had the Compromise of 1850, which was about Kansas and Iowa, and that had the whole Jayhawker thing, that birthed this Jesse James and all that. Was that Kansas, Arkansas? Well, Compromise 1850 clarified that with territories a little bit, and then you had this decision and popular sovereignty, that basically each one was closer and closer to the American Civil War. So basically, just to go over it, Chief Justice Taney, whether enslaved or free, were not considered citizens by the framers and had no rights which the white man was bound to represent. This isn't me saying it, I'm quoting the Chief Justice at the time, Robert B. Taney. It basically invalidated the Missouri Compromise because it had prohibited authority for territories. Now, they couldn't ban slavery in territories, and it declared the Missouri Compromise, this is 1857, unconstitutional under the Due Process Clause. Its aftermath, just a little bit, was widely considered one of the worst and most infamous Supreme Court decision ever. It outraged the North abolitionists, and this is what unified the Republican Party. And so this is 1857 was the ruling. The first Republican president was Abraham Lincoln in 1860. So this unified and got them a president elected in 3 years. And it split the Democrat Party, because the Democrat Party, there was pro-slavery, anti-slavery, but it unified the birth, the nascent, which is the beginning, the origins of the Republican Party, and it elected Abraham Lincoln, basically. Basically was overturned by the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, so basically it was there. So that's that. Now, keep going with the history. In 1880, the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra was the second oldest symphony orchestra in the United States. Okay. Anyone name me the oldest symphony orchestra in the United States? If you said the New York Philharmonic, you are correct. So let's, a little brief history of what went on there. We'll get back to that. There's some stuff related to stories here. Let's go with a Prohibition story. Kind of what's weirdly ironic with this, I don't know if it's really ironic or if it's Alanis Morissette ironic. There's two different types. There's actual ironic and there's Alanis Morissette ironic. This might be more Alanis Morissette. Okay, so in 1920, they did the Prohibition Act, the Volstead Act, and then the I think it was the 19th Amendment for Prohibition. Okay, that lasted 13 years until 1933. The vast majority of stuff I do and have done in this series with all my episodes has been during the Prohibition era, and every single paper, every single town I have found I could do all the stories I could do would be people doing something with alcohol during Prohibition. Isn't it ironic? So this one is 25-gallon still found in Webster Grove's home. Okay. Now remember, alcohol is illegal. This is from 1921. Alcohol is illegal to produce, sell, and consume. Not consume, but produce and sell and make or whatever. Basically, alcohol is illegal. I went through this with my Massachusetts episode. They had their earliest, Maine law, they had one of the earliest prohibition laws. Starting in the 1850s, it went all the way through federal prohibition. They still have, and they can still decide, certain states today can decide whether they want certain states, not states, but certain counties inside states, depending on state law, can decide whether they want to be dry counties or quote unquote wet counties. One of those, and I think it's changed, I need to look it up, but I think one of the most weirdly ironic ones, one of the weird ones was when they made Jack Daniels. You know, Jack Daniels, the whiskey, one of the most famous whiskeys on the face of the planet. The county it was made in was dry. So the only place you could get Jack Daniels whiskey in the place it was made was at the distillery. Now, they couldn't prevent you from bringing it into the county. If you worked or lived outside, or you brought it outside, brought it in, they couldn't, but you couldn't sell it in that county. And Jack Daniels was made there. I think they've changed that finally, but I know that was that way for years. The search was the result of the arrest of Williams. Okay, a 25-gallon still was found concealed behind a secret door in the basement of a home of Mac Williams. The return of the Mac, baby. And I love this. This is a home secret. I wanted my house. I live in a townhome. There's not any room for me to have a secret panel door. I would love one. You open it up. There's a nice bar there, like a speakeasy with some leather chairs, a huge ventilation system that I can smoke my cigars. I can't do that. I don't have a big enough house. There's not enough room in this house. I would love that though. You just hit a button or slide the door open and it revolves a secret room. So, we had a secret door in the basement. So this isn't the basement. I can't have a basement. I live in Florida. There's no way for me to have a basement. So, The search was a result of arrest of Williams yesterday morning when it was found that he was transporting liquor in a satchel. Really? You're transporting liquor in a satchel? If you know what a satchel is, basically think it's a bag. It's a type of like briefcase or type of bag. It's called a satchel. Ironically, that's one of the ways that, sidebar here, the famous pitcher Satchel Paige, his name was Leroy Page, he got his nickname because one of the theories about one of the stories about how he got his nickname was that when he was a kid growing up before he got to baseball, is he would carry satchels for people to make money, and he would carry so many satchels that you couldn't see him. So they would start calling him Satchel because all you saw were a bunch of satchels. So it's a type of luggage. A policeman who grew suspicious stopped Williams and asked him what it contained. Williams replied that the bag was filled with barber supplies. He's a barber. The policeman investigated and found 4 hot water bottles filled with alleged illicit liquor. Illicit. This is why I love stories like this. We don't use words like illicit enough anymore. I love the word illicit, words like that. We don't use them anymore in common language, and we should, because you know exactly, when I say illicit, you know exactly what I'm talking about in context. Illicit told the police that he did not know what the bag contained, and that he was being paid $5 for taking it to St. Louis and leaving it behind at a telephone post at Grand and Shet. So basically, this guy was a courier. He was saying, I don't know. So he didn't know. Supposedly, he was being paid $5 to carry it. Essentially, they found when they arrested him and they searched his home, he found the still. He wasn't being paid as a courier. He might have been paid to drop it off because that was payment, but he wasn't a courier. He was arrested and is being held in Clinton, which is outside there. They caught you with your 25-gallon still trying to. I was like, oh, I don't know what's in it. Being ignorant, I don't know. Just I would be paid $5. All right. A lot of robberies and crime today. Bank robbers kill police chief, 8 others shot. Now, normally I don't do when people are shot or people get done or police are killed, but this is interesting because not only did this have $12,000 in cash, but the leader of the holdup gang was dressed as Santa. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. This happened around Christmas time. All right? So, basic summary of the story. They tried to rob a bank. This was common back then, as we'll get to. It was super common to do bank robberies and payroll robberies back in the 20s. This was the nascent. This was the high point of all that. A lot of it was still being done on trains, but still not being super guarded as it is now. And these banks are super regular in their hours. You can get them. There weren't as many guards. Basically, they got wind of this bank robbery. Bank robbers tried to escape, killed the police chief. 8 others were shot. They were eventually captured. The leader of the gang, though, was just Santa Claus. Talk about bad Santa. It's a bad Santa. He was a bad. Or maybe not. Maybe he was taking the money. He was going to buy Christmas presents for all the kids. Maybe that was his way of buying Christmas presents. He robbed the bank and give it back. Maybe he was Robin Hood Santa. Maybe. Or maybe he was bad Santa. We don't know. We know he was arrested and charged, and they caught him, and they killed the chief. So probably was not gonna just buy the presents for the kiddies. It was just probably for his own Christmas. So as I was speaking, bank robberies and payroll properties. The year 1921. This was from that robbery was from 1927, so it was a little past that, but. The 1920s were the nascent, or the high point, was the high watermark for brazen, heavily armed payroll and mail heists across the United States. Because part of this was because we're coming off of World War One. The economy hasn't stabilized yet. We haven't quite reached the roaring 20s yet. That was 23, 24, 25, up until 29. We haven't quite reached it yet. Hasn't quite stabilized. Criminal gangs frequently targeted cash-heavy transfers meant for industrial workers. So they were robbing payrolls. Toledo's $1 million mail heist, February 1921. The crime shortly after midnight, February 17, 1921, four armed bandits ambushed a postal truck at the Toledo Central Post Office loading dock. So they were doing this by mail. The gang snatched 6 pouches filled with cash, currency, and roughly $900,000 in Liberty bonds. That's $1 million in 1921 money. $12 million today. It was considered the largest heist in U.S. history at the time. Think about that. $12 million in today's money they stole. Orchestrated by gang leader Joe Urbias, the thieves were pursued by federal agents across state lines. Most of the gang was arrested days later on a train to Chicago. The leader's sister, Wanda, dubbed the Queen of the Robbery Gang, escaped to Chicago and famously hid $80,000 of loot with the local police. She was just giving it away to the church. She was doing some tithing, giving it away to the church. Sounds like a thing. Also, there was the Ford Motor Company payroll robbery. So they're doing payroll again. The crime on June 16, 1921 in Memphis, Tennessee. Someone wasn't walking to Memphis that day. They were robbing in Memphis. An armored transfer carrying the weekly payroll for the Ford Motor Company. That's right, Ford. Plant was targeted. Bandits intercepted the paymaster, escaping with $39,000 in cash. Still a lot of money. A plant guard named Howard Shorty Gamble famously resisted, declaring the thieves would take the money over my dead body. Let me see what we got here. He was shot and killed during the exchange. The brazen nature of the attack shook the city and triggered a massive regional manhunt. Okay. Just the fact that your name is Gamble. You gambled that day. I get you're doing your job, you're a plant guard, and your name is Gamble. But let's not go after a bunch of armed guys and gamble with our lives. No, it's a bad pun, it's a bad joke. I didn't even know his name was Gamble and Shorty. What are they? Shorty Gamble. Shorty. Were you gambling tonight? No? Well, your last name's Gamble. Don't you always gamble? Yeah. Another one is the Sacco and Vanzetti trial of summer 1921. The crime itself on this was a big trial back then. Took place in April 1920. A 15,000 plus payroll robbery at the Slater and Memorial Shoe Company in Braintree, Massachusetts. It became the most famous robbery trial in American history. A highly controversial trial concluded in July 1921. Italian anarchists Niccolo Sacco and Bartolomeo or whatever Vanzetti were convicted of murdering the paymaster and security guard. The international outrage over the 1921 conviction led to worldwide protests following legal debate that lasted until their execution. So they were convicted of this bank robbery, whether or not maybe there was, I think there was a little bit of whether or not it was really them or there was an inside job or whatever, but they were convicted of it and it sparked worldwide protests, which, because maybe they're Italian, they're anarchists, I don't know. What's it with anarchists and starting shit up? Okay? It was anarchists that started World War I in 1914. It was anarchists that did a bank robbery. They both weren't Italian. Some were Serbian, but these guys were Italian. So the next one up is we have the Horton Brewery raids of August 1920. These are all 1921s. That's what I'm saying. All these are 1921s. So we're talking about robberies all over the year. Late August 1921. Hey, we're in August of 1920, so this is 105 years ago. New York City experienced a rash of coordinated strikes on businesses. Heavily armed payroll bandits staged a second consecutive raid on the Horton facilities, making off with $34,000 in cash meant for staff wages. Horton Brewery. Increase your damn security. This is the era of Tommy guns. This is the era of Capone. You couldn't go buy yourself some damn Tommy guns and have a couple guards sitting out there and just mow these guys down when they break in. Come on. Come on now. Give me a little bit. Pay some people to pay some security people. Get on the payroll a little bit here. Just do some security. Highlighting a lack of security. What I just said. The thieves mockingly lined up the company's employees, robbed them individually of an extra $120, and left $20,000 untouched in the safe they didn't have time to crack. They lined these people up. No one had a gun. There was no security. You've been robbed before. Do security. You're lucky they couldn't crack the damn safe. We're gonna find out later. They should have. We're gonna find out later that they should have burned the damn safe. Pulled out a blowtorch and burned it. Maybe the biggest, if not one of the biggest, train robberies of all time, at least in the U.S. The round-out train robbery of June 12, 1920, June 12, 1924, netted a staggering $2 million. That is roughly $37 million today. I don't care who you are. I don't care how much money you got in the bank. I don't care if you're Elon Musk. I don't care if you're Donald Trump. I don't care if you're Bill Gates. I don't care if you are Jeff Bezos. $37 million is a lot of money. Okay? I don't care. Alright? Making it the largest train heist in U.S. history. Orchestrated just 30 minutes north of Chicago in the tiny hamlet of Roundout, Illinois. The crime was pulled off in just 30 minutes by a unique alliance of old school outlaws and a shocking inside man. So let's find out who this inside man is. The inside man. The true mastermind was William J. Fahey, a highly decorated and trusted U.S. Post Office inspector. Would this be considered going postal? This is where the term comes from, going postal, post office people. While he didn't kill anyone, but he masterminded one of the largest train heists in U.S. history. He used his security clearance to pinpoint the exact train carrying the unregistered cash and security. This was unregistered. It hadn't been registered yet. The securities and the cash hadn't been marked down. It hadn't been registered. They got it on the way to where it was going. He partnered with Chicago underworld figures James Murray and safecracker Brent Glasscock. Really? Glasscock? Your name is Glasscock? You're a safecracker? You're cracking stuff and your name is Glasscock. I guess that's an appropriate name. That or it's Alanis Morissette ironic. Recruited the infamous Newton gang. They weren't eating fig Newtons, ladies and gentlemen. 4 brothers from Texas. Willis, Doc, Jess, and Joe. Who were legendary for a string of bloodless bank and train robberies. So they didn't kill people, they were bloodless. But they were from Texas. You know, everything's bigger in Texas. So they had to go for the biggest heist in history. Around 9 p.m., Willis and Doc Newton sneaked onto the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul train number 57 at Union Station in Chicago. As the train approached Roundout, they climbed over the coal tender at gunpoint and forced the engineer to halt at the dark, isolated crossroads. So, this is the isolated crossroads in a small town in the middle of the night. The rest of the gang met the train at the four stolen and 4 stolen Cadillacs. They're stealing Cadillacs. They're doing a train robbery and getting away in Cadillacs. Cadillac, yak, yak, yak. Little Billy Joel there. I know I can't sing. My wife tells me not to sing all the time. 4 stolen Cadillacs wearing masks, armed with explosives. They shattered the mail car windows, threw formaldehyde tear gas. Oh my God. Formaldehyde tear gas? They use formaldehyde to bomb people, and they're using it as part of the tear gas. Forcing the 12 postal clerks outside. So this was a heavily armed thing. They had 12 postal clerks in this thing, but they came outside. 62 specific mail pouches selected by various inside intelligence onto getaway cars. So he had earmarked and told him which 62 pouches to load that were the money. Despite a flawless plan, total chaos erupted in the loading phase. So this is their downfall, ladies and gentlemen. First, we have friendly fire. The engineer accidentally reversed the train slightly, confusing the gang in the dark. Brent Glasscock mistook brother Doc Newton for an armed postal worker and shot him 5 times. He cocked back that gun, didn't he? Sorry, bad joke. While rushing the severely wounded Doc into the getaway car, someone panicked and screamed out the name, Willis! What you talking about, Willis? What you talking about, Willis? The captive postal workers overheard the name. Well, if you shout out, what you talking about, Willis, I want to hear it too. Postal inspectors already kept files on the Newton brothers. Hearing the name Willis, they tracked the gang to Chicago hideout where they were secretly seeking secret medical attention for Doc. So they're trying to find a doctor to come and pay him off. Within just 11 weeks, the entire gang was captured. Glasscock confessed, exposing Inspector Fahey as the ultimate insider. All 8 co-conspirators were convicted and sentenced to federal prison by 1925. While the bulk of the cash was recovered, a portion of securities were never found. I don't know if they were found since then. A little bit about the Newton boys. At age 14, by 1940, age 25, Willis had robbed his first bank. They made acquaintance with William Ferry, a post inspector, and a railway clerk in Chicago. See, Fahey had fallen into financial troubles and his colleagues were aware of it. Then in 1923, they began living lavish lifestyles and flaunt newfound money. So this happened in what, 1924? So right before this thing, Fahey unwisely told a few close friends and colleagues that his new income came from entering a whiskey deal with the well-known prohibition peddler James Bourbon. Again, he used this influence. He had financial troubles, probably with the mob. He signed an illegal whiskey deal because this is prohibition. And again, everything is about money or alcohol. Even today, money and alcohol and financial troubles will tell people to do a lot of things. Never phases me. Now working with very criminals he pledged to catch. His dedication to the job. So they were aware he had financial troubles. All of a sudden he's got a bunch of money. So those financials went away. And he couldn't keep his damn mouth shut. So they teamed up. Again, they got arrested. Okay, so back to what I was saying. They buried around $35,000, which has still not been recovered as of 2025. So 100 plus years later, they still not found $35,000 of this money. So if anyone's looking for a quick $35,000, somewhere around Roundout, somewhere where this gang went, they went to Chicago. So somewhere between Roundout and Chicago, there's probably $35,000 buried. So Holiday, which is one of the conspirators, whereabouts remained unknown for nearly a month until he was identified in Little Rock. One of the Newton boys was arrested July 4th in Del Rio. Both men were positively identified by postal clerks who had worked in Chicago the day of the robbery and saw Jess and Willis board the train. They would all be released by 1930. The four Newton brothers, Holiday and Glasscock, pleaded guilty. Murray and Fahey did not, pitting them against one each other. This is about the punishments. Facing harsh sentences, the brothers and Glasscock agreed to testify against Murray and Fahey. Now remember, Murray was the mobster. As the trial ended, all men were found guilty and sentenced to federal prison. Fahey and Murray received the harshest sentences because they were the masterminds, 25 years each. Glasscock went to Leavenworth. Ultimately, all would be released by 1930. Not much is known of what happened to Fahey, Murray, and Glasscock after their release from prison. So they got 25 years, but were released like 6 years later. It's kind of weird. The Newton boys received the lies sentences, having no prior criminal records. Jess and Joe Newton, part of the gang, and were released on good behavior. Jess became a well-respected community member and a World War II veteran. He died in 1960 in Texas. Joe became a small business owner and an avid horseman. Look up some of those business dealings. Like Jess, he became a respected member of the community, even appearing on the Johnny Carson TV show in 1980 to retell the robbery. Joe Newton died in 1989. So Willis and Docs both spent at least 7 years in Leavenworth. Willis moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma upon his release, where he owned a series of gas stations and nightclubs, continuing a life of crime. Interesting. I wonder if this is where they got Tulsa King from. Gets released from jail, goes to Tulsa, starts building a criminal empire. I doubt it, but sounds familiar. It's just that it's not nightclubs, but he died at the age of 90. Unrepentant to the end. So he's like, I don't care, I did what I did. J.R. Williamson, the author of Willis Newton, The Last Texas Outlaw. So if you want a book about this guy, claims Willis was a flat-out evil person. Like Willis, when Doc was released, he continued a life of crime. Doc was arrested again in '68 for bank robbery. He died in prison. Do not learn your lesson. I don't know. Maybe they buried it. That's why we couldn't find it. Maybe one of the guys kept it. It wasn't buried, but it was kept, and that's how they spent it. As they started these businesses, they had to have some sort of capital. You're give a convicted felon capital, so maybe that's what it was. The roundout train robbery has often been overlooked in Postal Inspection Service history due to the criminal involvement of an inspector. Cases like this are valid to demonstrate how corruption in federal workforce has historically existed and has been addressed. Discussing these stories can better help train, background check, and investigate internal issues. I'm exposing it here now. Postal Service, you need to do better. This is your history, you need to do it. So as I was saying, speaking of robberies, though, that's payroll robberies, but we have jewelry robberies. Elgin, Illinois, which is just over the river. Burglars entered Shanoff Brothers jewelry store last night, stripped the windows and several of the showcases, and escaped with jewelry valued $2,500. So basically, if you've been to a jewelry store, anyone walked by, they had the stuff in the window and they had the stuff in the display cases. They took $2,500 of that stuff in a robbery. Okay, again, this is robbery heavy today. The store is 2 doors from the police station. 2 doors down from the police station. They're lucky no one walked out of the doors and saw them robbing this place. Talk about trying to be a little bit lucky here. Remember I said they couldn't crack the safe? One of these robberies, they couldn't crack the safe. The Horton Brewery raids. Well, here we have one. Again, these are all from St. Louis newspapers. Thieves burned safe open for $100,000 in jewels. All right. Theft of the jewelry valued at $100,000 was discovered today in the office of Finley Stores Jewelry, sorry, it's hard to read some of these stories. Company, sometime between closing time Saturday and opening time, I guess, in Sunday today, which is, I guess, Robbers have entered the offices and burned open 2 safes and a strong box with acetylene torches. They should have got together with these guys. But this is a 4-year-old story. 4 years older than that one. But I'm sure they would have done it in 1921, 1925. So well prepared for emergencies were the safecrackers that they had brought fire extinguishers with them to guard against this danger. They brought fire extinguishers just in case something caught on fire. Not only are they thieves, but they're careful thieves. Because don't want to burn the place down while you're robbing it. That means that's arson. That's even greater stuff. Because if you don't get caught, you got the money. But they're definitely going to investigate the arson. Let's just say it's heavy, heavy, heavy. Now, to me, this is a little bit of a funny story. Kidnapper's pigeon eludes cops who chased it in a plane. A pigeon didn't beat a plane, hid from a plane. Detectives unable to follow Bird to dun of abductors. Well, with ransom demands of $102,500 unmet, that's a weird odd number. Growing tear was expected today for the safety of New York's 2 kidnapped victims. Growing tear? You mean terror? It says tear. I mean, it must mean terror. They didn't catch it because, again, tear and terror. 16-year-old son of a Quinton County District Attorney and a stockbroker. They took a district attorney's kid. You don't think they're going to be coming down on you like a ton of bricks? Don't take the kid. Okay. This is not advice. Do not take this. But if you're ever going to kidnap someone, don't do it. Don't kidnap it. If you're ever going to kidnap them, don't take a cop, politician, or a member of, don't take a lawyer's kid, especially the DA's kid. That will not get you anywhere. Because you will get more heat than you deserve. Take a rich person's kid. Because they're liable to pay you. You might get caught, but you might not either. And today's world is really hard because what are you going to do? There's video cameras everywhere. But I'm just saying, back then, take the rich person because the ransom would be paid. And an heir. When a gang believed to be the Hazleton kidnappers attempted to get $2,500 for the release by the use of a carrier pigeon, the youth's father informed the police. And this is $102,000 here. Now it says $2,500. They're not reading their own story, are they? The youth's father informed the police an airplane was chartered in the hope. An airplane was chartered in the hope of following the pigeon to the alleged abductors, but the bird soared back and forth and soon was out of sight of the detectives on the plane. The plane couldn't keep up with the bird. The carrier pigeon was found on a street corner to which the Hazelton's father was directed by the mysterious telephone call. Bird went to the place of the drop-off. How funny is that? Just reading this. The father realizes his son may be in danger and insists on seeing the youth's handwriting or some sort of clothing before turning the money over. While relatives and friends of the Rosenthal's are ready to give $100. Okay, so one guy they wanted $2,500 for, the other guy they wanted $100,000. Requested for safe return. Nothing has been heard from his abductors. So they wanted $2,500 for one, and the other one they wanted $100,000. That's where they got the money from. That's kind of funny. A pigeon outdid a plane. So one more robbery story. One more robbery story. One more robbery story today, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Headline: Suspect in $46,000 robbery captured. Thomas says, "And girl, just a girl, random girl. It's a girl. Hey, girl, come here. We're gonna go get $46,000 and we're gonna go run. Okay." Taken after fight in apartment. Ooh, a fight. Ooh, like fights. Thomas Hayes, 27 years old, charged in a warrant with the participation in a 46,000 Standard Oil payroll robbery. Payroll, Standard Oil. Now, if you don't know about Standard Oil was Rockefeller's company before they broke it up. That was John D. Rockefeller's company, Standard Oil. That's how he became the richest person on the face of the planet. Say what you want about his business practices. I'm not here. I'm just saying that was his company. That's how he made his money, with Standard Oil. But we know about Rockefeller Center. That was part of his property. He gave it there. He put his name on the building, and that's how that works. But Chief of Detectives Hogland. Oh wait, here we go. August 4th, and Miss Margaret McDonald, 21, were arrested yesterday when the detectives forced their way into an apartment on Watergate Avenue. Watergate. What's it about Watergate Avenue? What's, like, certain things pop up, like payroll robberies, Watergate, everything. Certain things just happen to have, feels like there's certain words that always are associated with things, like Watergate, Watergate Avenue, Watergate Hotel. Stop naming things Watergate. When Chief of Detectives Hogland, at the head of the squad, with the detectives tried to enter the apartment made by St. Louis detectives and Chief of Police Ward. This makes no sense. This sentence makes no sense. With Chief of Detectives Hogland at the head of the squad, the detectives tried to enter the apartment made by the St. Louis detectives. Oh, okay. Chief Police Ward and University City Police Miss McDonald was acting as a house picking at the latch of the screen door. So she was trying to get out the back, but their progress was barred when Miss McDonald slammed the door. So they're trying to pick the door. After prying open the front window, they entered the room as Hayes, who was dressing hurriedly, reached for an automatic pistol beneath the pillow on a bed in the room. The weapon was seized. A subsequent struggle. Hayes was struck several times on the head, suffering deep scalp wounds. The rest followed investigation. Keeper for the apartment, in the absence of Miss Margaret Clark, the tenant who was away for the summer. So they went into someone else's apartment. Someone noticed them. They called the cops, and they were arrested. When he tried to shoot, they tried to reach for a gun. So many different things here to wrap up, and the way they write, this is one of the times where them writing it, it's not great because it's really hard to understand some of this stuff. Answered Mrs. Clark's advertisement under the name of Farmer. Okay, so she was gone for the summer. She wanted someone to go into the apartment to probably live there and make some money. This guy answered it. Hayes is married and is said to be separated from his wife. Well, yeah, because you stole $46,000. I would get ready. I would boot you out the door too. My bad. Detectives learned that a man answering his description had been seen frequently at the apartment. Yada yada yada. So basically, they determined that the robbery was planned for July. But that the woman who knew about the arrangement spread the news so that the day the robbery was to taken place, 5 gangs of St. Louis crooks were in the wood. Were there. It was decided not to commit the robbery at the time it was learned. Again, don't tell people, and you'll be fine. Okay. So interesting. Now we're gonna go a little completely different. We're gonna take a complete right turn here. Complete right turn. Let me just get my paper straight right here. A complete right turn here. I found this a very interesting story. When you're doing this search, these papers have pages upon pages. Some things should strike you. Montenegro king, father of Queen of Italy, is dead. Now, the reason why I went to Montenegro. I went to Kotor. It's a beautiful city. If you ever get a chance to go to Montenegro, go there, go to Kotor, just go to Montenegro. It's amazing. I loved every minute. I was on a cruise, spent the day in the town. It's a great town, great people. I recommend you go to Montenegro, go to that whole region, go to Croatia, Bosnia, all that area. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous. It's been built, it's not, there were some wars in that area in the early 90s, in the 90s, but that's all gone now. It's amazing, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. I recommend, if you're going to go somewhere in Europe that's not super crowded, that is beautiful, go to Montenegro, go to Croatia, go to Bosnia, go to the whole area. It's amazing. So, King Nicholas of Montenegro died yesterday. Nicholas was one of the monarchs of Europe who lost his throne during the World War. So, okay, so World War I, in essence, was basically a big family fight. It was. Big, huge family fight. Most of the monarchs in some way were related, okay, to everybody else. This guy, we'll find out, pretty much two monarchs were responsible. Two people were responsible, well not two, but two people were nicknamed certain things. So during World War I, empires toppled. German Empire, Austria-Hungary, Montenegro, the Ottoman Empire. All this stuff fell apart. Europe was ripped apart. Empires fell all over the place. Okay. So he lost it. He didn't like losing it, but Montenegro entered the war as the ally of Serbia, who started the war, by the way. Serbia was where the war started. Bosnia actually is where the war started. Sarajevo, talking about the shot around the world, Sarajevo. But the final settlement, the country was incorporated into the new nation of Yugoslavia. Nicholas never recognized the validity of the amalgamation and vainly sought to retain his throne. Civil War Montenegro followed. The attempts of Yugoslavia in the main successful to absorb the little mountain kingdom. Nicholas was born in 1841. He was proclaimed Prince of Montenegro in 1860. In 1910, he took the title of king. He was the father of the present Queen of Italy. Now, speaking of that, pardon me, my throat's bothering me a little bit. Talking too much, talking too loud. So, Nicolo Petrogras Negos. September 1841. March 1920 was the last monarch of Montenegro. Reigning prince of 1860-1918, reigning prince from 1860-1910. As the country's first and only king from 1910 to 1980. His grandsons were Alexander I of Yugoslavia and Umberto II of Italy, among others. 5 of Nicholas's 6 daughters were married, each to princesses and kings, giving Nicholas the nickname the father-in-law of Europe. Nicholas shared so great with his contemporary, Christian IX of Denmark. Christian IX's grandchildren also married members of European royalty from multiple countries. Now Queen Victoria, the famous British monarch, was called the grandmother of Europe because if they weren't part of Nicholas I or Denmark's or Christian in Denmark, they were from Victoria. World War I was a family squabble. That's what it was. It was a family squabble that dragged the whole world into it. They couldn't just sit down at a big family dinner and work out all their sticking problems and not have to bring guns to the place. If everybody had gotten together and say, hey cousin, hey, and just sit down behind closed doors, had a huge feast, and said, we're not going to go to war, we're going to fix all the world's problems, World War never would have happened. But no. They had to go shoot each other up. Alright. I couldn't be remiss if I didn't do St. Louis without doing a couple things from St. Louis, okay? Making sure I got all my things here. Okay. So, I'm a sports guy. I love sports, all sports. I'm a huge baseball guy. When What am I doing here? I'm trying to find something here. So I want to do a couple major things in the world of sports here, if I can find them. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're going to do this in a little order that I normally don't do it in, but we're going to do yeah, here we go. Sorry, this stuff got all. We're going to do a little bit about the 1904 St. Louis Olympics, which give me a minute here. The 1904 St. Louis Olympics. Okay. Here's what we got. Okay. Okay. We're going to do a little bit about the 1904 St. Louis Olympics. Okay, so boxing, 1904 St. Louis Olympics was an infamous Olympics for one thing and one thing only. A, was famous for several reasons. Not one thing, but mostly one thing. It was, first of all, I didn't know this, I learned this. It was the first non-European country ever to host the Olympics. Okay, Paris and Greece, the first two, 1896, 1900, 1904. Greece and Paris were the first ones, Athens and Paris. Boxing, dumbbells, wrestling, catch wrestling really became freestyle wrestling. And the decathlon made their debuts. Now the decathlon, if you went to the decathlon now, you're considered arguably the greatest athlete on the face of the planet because you had to excel at 10 different sports enough to beat everybody else in the world. And it's like javelin, it's like hurdles, running, field stuff. It's amazing. If you're a decathlete, hey, hats off to you. Hats off to you for being a decathlete. Love it. Now, I love great stories, and this is one of them. One of the most remarkable athletes of the was American gymnast George Iser, who won 6 medals. What makes him so remarkable? His left leg was made of wood. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. He had a wooden leg. Now, there's no Special Olympics at this time. There's no special. Today's guy probably would be in the Special Olympics and not in the regular Olympics, where he wouldn't have won 6 medals. But back in 1904, there was no Special Olympics. So this guy went on there and crushed it with 6 medals. And Frank Kugler, who won 4 medals in freestyle wrestling, weightlifting, and tug of war. That's right. Tug of war was an Olympic sport. I want tug of war back as an Olympic sport. I want tug of war back. Let's bring back tug of war. That'd be a great Olympic sport. You could get a tug of war team together. That would be amazing. Let's do that. Start a petition to do tug of war as an Olympic sport. I want that back. Make him the only competitor to win a medal in 3 different sports. Not 3 medals, 3 different sports. Usually you specialize. Like the decathlon is 10 different events in one thing. This is 3 separate. This is wrestling, weightlifting, and tug of war. Only guy to win 3 different sports in the same Olympics. Not 3 different things inside the sport. It's not like he won 3 different races, track and field races. This is 3 completely different sports. Okay. Now we come to the 1904 Olympics. So the 1904 Olympics had one event that was steeped in controversy, and that was the Olympic marathon. Now, today the marathon is 26.2 miles. We all know that, but back here it wasn't standardized as that. So, the initial winner, the first to arrive at the finish line in 3 hours and 13 minutes, more than 13 minutes slower than the winning time in 1900, so it was slower, and we'll find out why, was Frederick Loris. After being hailed the winner, he had his photograph taken with Alice Roosevelt, the daughter of then U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt. She placed a wreath upon Loris' head and was about to award him the gold medal when spectators claimed Loris had not run the entire race. Had not won the entire race. Suffering from cramps, he actually dropped out of the race after 9 miles, hitched a ride back to the stadium in a car, waving at spectators and runners during the ride. When the car broke down at the 19th mile, he re-entered the race and jogged to the finish line. No wonder why he won. Half the race, he drove it. He got ridden. Okay. Upon being confronted by the furious race officials, he immediately admitted the deception, despite the claim he was playing a practical joke. Again, what's with these people saying I was joking? I didn't know I didn't know what was in the bag. I was joking. It's all good. The AAU responded by banning Lures for life. That was thus commuted to 6 months in February 1905. Lures formally apologized, but he did win the 1905 Boston Marathon. So the guy wasn't a complete non-runner. He won the Boston Marathon, which is one of the elite marathons. Thomas Six ended up winning the event, although he benefited from various forms of what would not be allowed today. So we have a PED controversy. 10 miles from the finish, Hicks led the race by 1.5 miles, 2.4 kilometers, but he had been restrained from stopping and lying down by his trainers. From then to the end of the race, Hicks received several doses of strychnine, rat poison, which stimulates the nervous system in small doses mixed with brandy and egg white. The guy did Rocky on steroids. Anyone watch the movie Rocky? He's drinking raw eggs. This guy had brandy, raw eggs, and doses of strychnine. This is Rocky on steroids. Rocky on PEDs. This is the earliest recorded use of performance-enhancing drugs in the revived Olympic Games. He continued to battle onwards, hallucinating, was barely able to walk for most of the course. When he reached the stadium, his support team carried him over the line. Okay, this would not be allowed today. Can't be carried over the line today. Holding him in the air while he shuffled his feet as he's still running. Hicks had to be carried off the track on a stretcher, and by dying, the stadium had not been treated by 4 doctors. He lost 8 pounds, which is roughly 3.6 kilograms during the course. He lost 8 pounds during the race. 8. Now, another guy here. Cuban postman Andrean Carvajal also joined the marathon, arriving at the last minute after losing all his money gambling in New Orleans. Again, New Orleans has come up several times in this, which makes sense. It's right down the Mississippi. You just go to Mississippi, go down the Mississippi. You're right there. He hitchhiked to St. Louis, had to run the event in street clothes that he cut around the legs to make them into shorts. He ran the race in cutoffs. Having not eaten in 40 hours, he saw a spectator eating 2 peaches. He asked if he could have the peaches. The spectator declined. He stole the peaches. He's like, I haven't eaten in 40 hours. Peaches. Give the runner the peaches. Okay. He then stole the peaches and ran away. Later, he stopped off at an orchard en route to eat some apples, which turned out to be rotten. The rotten apples caused him to have strong stomach cramps. He had to lie down and take a nap. Despite his discomfort and pause, he managed to finish in 4th place. The guy lost his money, hitchhiked, hadn't eaten in 40 hours, had some rotten apples, and finished in 4th place. Imagine if the guy hadn't laid down and eaten some rotten apples, he might have won the damn race. Would have been a hell of a story. That would have been a great sports story. A Cuban postman gambles his money when New Orleans, hitchhikes, wins the marathon in street clothes. That would have been a hell of a story if he had won the thing. Stupid apples. Arriving without correct document. We got more, okay? So, the only source of water for the competitors was about halfway 12 miles, 750 yards mark, or the 19.98 kilometer mark. However, Carvajal managed to get a drink of water from the water tower roughly 6 miles in. Edward Sullivan, the chief organizer of the Olympics, was set up and to set no other water than 24 miles. It was 24 miles and 15 yards. It was just under 26 miles. Even though the marathon was in 90-degree heat over unpaved roads that were choked with dust. The reason why they were choked with dust was A, the roads weren't paved, but also race officials followed in cars to make sure they stayed on track, make sure they didn't do anything, didn't work for the one guy, but to try to make sure no one died, make sure no one cheated, make sure they stayed on, they didn't take any shortcuts or anything. So that pulled up a bunch of dust on this unpaved thing. His essential reason was to conduct research on purposeful dehydration. This combined with poor officiating saw the marathon and with the worst ratio of finishers to starters. 32 people started, 14 finished. And the slowest winning time, which was 29 minutes slower than the second slowest winning time. 3 hours, 28 minutes, and 53 seconds was the final winning time. After all this controversy. The guy in charge was conducting an experiment about dehydration. So he gave them no water. Think about that. So that one more thing. So we're talking about St. Louis. We can't talk about St. Louis without talking about maybe, not only just in St. Louis, but maybe one of the most influential non-players in the history of baseball. Here we go. Okay. Guy named Branch Rickey. Now, Branch Rickey was a player in the early 1900s. Okay. So, but what he did, and what he did for baseball, and what he did for baseball was immeasurable. Mostly for the Cardinals, but he was also in the Pirates organization. He was in the Dodgers organization. Now, he might be most famous for being the guy who signed Jackie Robinson. Now, let's go into baseball a little bit here, okay? Up until 1947, okay? Black players, Negroes, whatever you want to call them, weren't allowed into MLB baseball. It wasn't written on the books. It was an unofficial, unwritten rule, okay? No one dared challenge it because of one guy. Kennesaw Mountain Landis, okay? Okay. Now, he tends to be Kennesaw Mountain Landis did not want anyone going. As soon as he died, Jackie Robinson got signed in 1945. But let's go back. Why did Branch Rickey think this was even a viable option? Well, while at Ohio Wesleyan University, Rickey praised Folas, calling him a wonder. It's also supposed that Folas poised in class under the pressures of racial tension. So, Folas is one of the first black players in professional football and one of the first in college at Ohio Wesleyan. And played some professional teams too in the Ohio area. That's just why Canton's in the football. Anyone wonder why Canton's in the Football Hall of Fame? This is where Canton Bulldogs, all these guys sort of started, and these are the precursors to the NFL. Yeah. And this is exceptional play in spite of all these pressures. This guy, who was his teammate and friend, inspired him to sign Jackie Robinson. This happened in the early 1900s. How Rickey ever stated his inspiration wasn't this guy. And the base was the ill treatment he saw received by his black catcher Charles Thomas of Hawaii Wesleyan, who was coached by Rickey in 1903 and 1904. So these two guys combined Folas and his exceptional playing, and the way his catcher, which he was coaching the team in 1903, handled the pressures. And when Rickey signed Robinson, Charles Thomas' story was made known in the paper. So they made this guy known. So those two guys were the inspiration. He saw this firsthand. He saw these guys handle it. He's like, I need a guy like that to break this cover when it happens. Ironically, Kennesaw Mountain Landis died in 1944. 1945, Jackie Robinson gets signed in the Dodgers organization now before he went to the Dodgers, he was influential in St. Louis. He created the farm system, the minor leagues. Now, there were minor leagues before this, but they weren't as organized as they were and everything else. Him and a couple of his people in St. Louis, he was part owner of the St. Louis team for a while, Sam Brehan. They wanted a way under their system where everybody was, because in this time, early 1900s, every town had a baseball team, and all these leagues were forming. But you had to go out and scout these guys, and they all necessarily all weren't trained the same and everything else. So they created this. They wanted to create a system where if we sign you, we put you in our system, you learn the way we want you to play, all the way up through the big leagues. Once you're signed, this is now the norm. It actually, people thought it would kill the minor leagues. It actually saved them, because yes, the attendance did drop a little bit, but it never bottomed out, especially in the war years and everything else. Okay, so not only did he do that in St. Louis, responsible for the Gas House Gang, he managed Hornsby, he managed these guys, found Dizzy Dean, Daffy Dean, all these guys that would be the catalyst, Pepper Martin, Marty Marion, all these guys he found. But when he was with the Dodgers, he was responsible for the first full-time spring training facility in Vero Beach. So this is the 30s and 40s. He's doing spring training. Now everybody has spring training. It's Arizona and Florida. Depending, if you're a West Coast team, usually you have it in Arizona. If you're an East Coast team, it's usually in Florida. First one to have it, Dodgertown, Vero Beach. The Dodgers finally moved. It encourages the use of now commonplace tools such as the batting cages, pitching machine, and batting helmets. Okay. All right, he did this. I got to get out of here. This is about to die on me. Basically, he invented modern day sabermetrics. Him and his guys created a platoon system, tracked on base percentage, batting out, more important than batting average. Figured out platoon system was great, and everything to go. So that's the end of this thing. So everybody, have a great day. Be neat, my friends. And until next time, pour yourself a glass.